Welcome back to WCB Jazz Vinyl. October is shaping up to be a great month for jazz releases, and so I wanted to make a video about some of those that are upcoming, including a Tone Poet sort of special edition 3 LP set that was just announced. There's a live date by Horace Silver, there's a new reissue series featuring Muse Records, and then there's a brand new release by the label that I'm a part of that I want to share with you in this video. So that's what we're about to dive into. As always, go ahead and hit like, hit subscribe, and of course you can follow me on Instagram. I'm at what_can_brown. All right, so let's tackle these in turn. Some of this is like new news, like stuff that just came out, press releases that just came out really in the last week or so. And so this is sort of hot off the press, but these are each titles that I'm really excited about. So let's start with the Blue Note, actually. So the first one is Ike Quebec, the 45 Sessions. So what is this particular release? Well, I've actually made a video on this in the past where I basically covered this idea that there's all these Blue Note sessions that were released in the 50s and 60s that were put out on singles but never actually made it to an LP. So what they're doing with this Ike Quebec set, again 3 discs, is that they're compiling all of the singles. Some of those singles did make an album, and some of them didn't. But out of all musicians that were recording for Blue Note, Ike Quebec, I believe, has the most singles that never made an album. And so this is really the only way to hear this stuff, unless you're collecting that original item, the 45 single, or if you bought the Mosaic box set that I believe came out in the 1980s. So technically this is a reissue of that Mosaic box set, but it is a remastering, and it's included in the Tone Poet series. So again, this is a 3 LP Tone Poet vinyl set. The 45 singles come from between 1952 and 1962. And this is being produced by Joe Harley. It is all analog, cut directly from the original master tapes by Kevin Gray. 180 gram, pressed at RTI. There's a trifold jacket. So I think that this is going to have sort of all the hallmarks of the standard Tone Poet series, and it is currently available for pre-order. I know that they put it out to Tone Poet Society members for maybe a day or so, just as an initial pre-order. And now I believe that anybody, whether you're a society member or not, can go in and pre-order this. So the price point on this is $72.98, but you do get a lot of content again across these 3 LPs. I myself am a big fan of this music, and I've made an effort over the years to actually collect all of those original 45 singles. So I already have them, but let's be real, if you want to hear the music, those 45s are cumbersome. They're I believe pressed on styrene. I think they use styrene material for those 45s. So the likelihood of this sounding better, well, of course it's going to sound better than sourcing it or than listening to those original 45s. So I'm pretty excited about this, and I also think that I don't know. It feels to me like Blue Note is sort of expanding, I don't know, their horizons. They're looking at a little bit broader picture at the label and figuring out what might be of interest to folks and vinyl collectors out there. And like I said, I think this is a great choice. I'm excited about it. All right, the next one is also a Blue Note release, and it is by Horace Silver. It is titled Silver in Seattle, live at the Penthouse. This is coming out on October 24th. So this is not a part of the Tone Poet series, and in fact, the producer on this session is Zev Feldman. And in many ways, this feels like the sort of session that he would put out, say, for Elemental, maybe Resonance, one of the other labels that he works with. But in this case, it just makes more sense that it would come out on Blue Note because, well, it's a Blue Note crew. So this features, in addition to Horace Silver, Woody Shaw, Joe Henderson, Teddy Smith, as well as Roger Humphreys. As far as the content goes, this is newly discovered recording from 1965, recorded at the Penthouse Jazz Club in Seattle. I believe it was originally recorded by a radio host and engineer named Jim Wilkie. So what does this include? Well, similar to maybe other projects that you'd expect from Zev, it does includes a booklet. Actually features photos in this booklet, not only by Francis Wolff, also by Burt Goldblatt, which I think is really interesting, both because his art sort of adorns most of this room, with the exception of this wall behind me, which is all Francis Wolff. But Burt Goldblatt was on the scene at a lot of live sessions. So I'm interested to see perhaps what he captured from this session. As far as the material though, there's 6 total tracks, 3 on each side. So we're not talking necessarily about like these sprawling kind of endless soloing types of vehicles. If there's 3 tracks per side, it's probably going to be relatively contained. And looking at the actual track list, there are some familiar titles on here, including Song for My Father, the Cape Verdean Blues, Sayonara Blues, as well as The Kicker. So for those of you who love Horace Silver's material and love Blue Note's content, you're going to recognize some of the material here because he really does play some of the songs that I think he's best known for. So this one actually is at a much more affordable price point of just $32.99. So not really being positioned as that kind of tone poet thing. Obviously the recording is going to be more of a live feel versus a studio feel. And actually you can go and preview one of the tracks from this recording. They've uploaded it to like, Apple Music and where else? I think on YouTube. So I'll try to link that in the description so you can get a sense of exactly what this is going to sound like. All right, so shifting topics just a little bit. The next one up is actually 3 titles, and it is under a new label called Time Traveler Recordings. This is a new label that is actually being launched by Zev Feldman. So we just talked about Zev. Obviously, he has his hands in a number of different labels. He's a producer for a lot of different labels. This is one that essentially is his own label, and he's launching it to put out a Muse Records reissue program. And so the first 3 releases are coming out on October 17th. So what these are, across the board, you'll recognize some of the hallmarks actually in terms of folks that he's used for some of his other reissue programs at other labels. But the remastering, each of these sessions are being remastered and cut directly from the analog tapes by Matthew Luthans at the Mastering Lab, pressed on 180 gram at Optimal, and they do include Stoughton jackets. So that is the case for all 3 of these. So what are the records? Well, in my opinion, some of these are the best that the Muse label ever put out. And in fact, I actually put together a video some time ago for YouTube that talked about some of my favorite recordings on Muse. I probably referenced, hey, these are the ones that I would start with if they were going to reissue it. I haven't watched that video in a while, but it's possible I said something along the lines of that. And I sure like to think that some of these would have been included in my list. So the first one that they're putting out is Kenny Barron's Sunset to Dawn. I say first, all of these are coming out on the 17th. But Kenny Barron's Sunset to Dawn. The lineup on this includes Bob Cranshaw, Freddie Watson, Richard Landrum. As far as what this music is, because actually there's a very different kind of quality to each of these albums, which I think is one of the reasons why it makes sense to lead with these, to kind of have a sort of representative style in terms of the music that Muse put out. So this particular album, I would describe it as kind of trippy, atmospheric in places. It does settle into a groove, so it doesn't all stick to kind of an avant-garde thing, even though that is how the album sort of starts out. I would recommend listening to the track Sunset, which I think, in my opinion anyway, is the best on the album. So this is one that I own an original copy of, and yet I'm still really curious about how this is going to sound. All right, so the next one is probably one of the most recognizable albums that Muse ever put out, and this is by Roy Brooks. It is called The Free Slave. This is a live recording, which I think a lot of people forget, but it just so happens to sound really good. This was recorded live at the Left Bank Jazz Society. The lineup includes George Coleman, Woody Shaw, Hugh Lawson, and Cecil McBee. This one, in contrast to the Kenny Barron title, has more of a soul, and I would say post-bop kind of feel that I think people are really going to like. The opener on this album gets into kind of an extended groove that's really cool with a stellar solo by George Coleman. And really everybody that listens to this album thinks it's amazing. It's one of the reasons why it's difficult to grab a first pressing for anything less than like $300. So it's a good thing that these are being reissued, made available for folks in presumably a great format at a much more affordable price. So speaking of that, the third one that they're putting out on the 17th is another rare one. This is by Carlos Garnett and is called Cosmos Nucleus. This, I believe, is the first vinyl reissue ever of this particular recording. I would say out of the 3 releases that I'm discussing, this is the one that is sort of soul and funk forward. So lots of that kind of sort of funk guitar effect. I think you know what I mean, especially on the opener titled Saxy. But great playing by all, very clean sounding recording, heavy production on this one. So it's not as gritty as the Roy Brooks, not perhaps as out there and atmospheric as the Kenny Barron, but still very, very good. The lineup on this one includes Cecil McBee, Otis McCleary, Randy Gilmore. There's some vocals on here by Cheryl Alexander, but this is a large group. I'm not going to reference them all. You can look it up. But this is a large group. Again, heavy production value on this one. This one is also one of the most expensive titles on the label, possibly because the only copy that you can get is that original one. It's never been reissued, like I said. So the plan for Zev Feldman and his Time Traveler Recordings label is to release additional Muse titles every few months, but these are the 3 that are coming out first on October 17th. The website has referenced some of the subsequent releases, at least in terms of who the leaders will be, and those include Woody Shaw, Joao Donato, Clifford Jordan, Joe Chambers, and more. So we can think about maybe what those upcoming titles would be, but I think that this is a new label, new reissue series definitely to watch out for. All right, so this next one is one that I'm particularly close to, and that is because I have actually joined the label and have been working on this first release for over a year now, and it's coming out on October 24th. Very excited. So the label is Gammaut Recordings, and the release is Pepper Adams Quintet, originally put out on Mode Records in 1957. This is a 45 RPM single disc release. You might ask, how is that possible? It's about 31 minutes of content, perhaps a little bit on the shorter side, but remember, a lot of the sort of the classic albums from Blue Note in 1957 and 58 were only like 30 to 35 minutes. So it isn't that short in terms of comparative material. It just so happens that we were able to put it out on a single disc. So this is a stereo reissue. It was originally recorded in both stereo and mono, but only released by Mode in 1957 in mono. It was released some years later by the reissue label Interlude with a completely different cover in stereo. But we're releasing it in stereo and not mono because, well, the mono tapes have actually been lost with time. So in our case, the remastering was done by Bernie Grunman, and the precise source material is a safety tape copy, more specifically a 15 IPS Dolby flat copy, which was indeed the best available source because the original stereo tapes were too fragile to use. This is being plated and pressed at Gotta Groove Records, and Stoughton is doing the gatefold jackets. And we've actually put together a 40-page tipped-in booklet with new essays and illustrations, as well as previously unseen session photos. So excited about that. We're limiting this release to 2,000 copies, and they will indeed be numbered. So the plan right now is to sell this direct on the website. The purchase price of $50 does include free shipping in the United States. At the moment, because I know that there's, half my followers out there are reside outside the United States. At the moment, there's no plan to work with a distributor, but we are trying to find ways to make it available for our customers outside the US as cheaply as we can. So feel free to message us through the website if you have any questions about how to get a copy. But the pre-order is currently available now. And again, it comes out on October 24th. So this isn't going to be the last time that I share information about this release. I actually want to do more of a robust video that kind of shows you what it is. Just waiting to get the copies in myself, which should come about probably in the next couple of weeks. So look forward to that. I'll show you what it looks like. Hesitate to say give you a review because it's going to be difficult for me to remove myself from the item in the process. I think probably to provide a review, but I'm excited to get more in depth in terms of what it is, what it includes. I'd love to get my partner Philippe on the channel as well, and maybe kind of talk through or do an interview about his process for discovering this material and deciding to choose it, and the sort of the thought process that went into that. So I'm very excited really about all these releases, but obviously especially about this last one. If you're interested in learning more about this release and putting in a pre-order, you can go to gammaut.com. I'll include a link in the description, and you can go check it out. So yeah, I think I'm going to leave it at that. What did I cover? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 releases that are all coming out in October. A lot of ways to spend money, but I think that these are all really exciting releases to keep on your radar. And Yeah, it just shows that as time goes on, you think everything's been reissued, and there's plenty more recordings that are sort of unearthed and prioritized for release. So a lot to be excited about. Thanks everyone for sticking with me, and I'll see you next time.